The night was darker than any dream, and the cold was sharper than any knife. Snow whipped across the endless Siberian tundra, burying every trace of life beneath its white fury. The temperature had fallen to -71 degrees Celsius, the kind of cold that could freeze breath before it left your lips. And in the middle of that deadly storm stood Anya, 7 months pregnant, her tears turning instantly into ice on her cheeks. Her body trembled, not just from the brutal wind, but from the sight she could hardly believe. Just a few steps away, the man who had promised to protect her forever, her husband Sergei, was walking away. His arm was wrapped tightly around Irina, Anya's childhood friend, who now leaned against him with a triumphant smile. "No. Please, Sergei, don't leave me here," Anya screamed, her voice breaking as the snow swallowed her words. Her swollen belly pressed against her coat, her hands reaching out in desperation. Sergei did not look back. His boots crunched on the ice, his tall frame disappearing into the wall of snow. Irina glanced back once, her eyes cold, her lips curling into a smirk that cut deeper than the wind. The betrayal was so complete, so merciless, that Anya's knees gave out. She fell onto the frozen ground, her breath coming in painful gasps. She pressed her hands against her belly, whispering to the life inside her. "Hold on, my child. Mama will not give up." But the storm was merciless. Snow piled around her, threatening to bury her alive. The roar of the wind was joined by a deep, terrifying sound in the distance, a rumble like thunder rolling beneath the earth. The mountain above the nomadic village groaned, warning of an avalanche. In the far valley, 10,000 reindeer clustered together, stamping and crying out as if they sensed the danger to come. The nomads of Yakutia hurried to secure their herds, their shouts lost in the blizzard. But for Anya, the world had narrowed to one unbearable truth. She had been abandoned, betrayed by the two people she trusted most. Her body grew weaker with every heartbeat. The icy wind tore at her coat, slicing into her skin. Darkness crept at the edges of her vision, and she wondered if this was how it would end, alone, broken, her unborn child stolen by the storm. Then, faintly, through the blizzard came the sound of hooves, slow, steady, deliberate. Someone was approaching. Anya tried to lift her head, her lashes heavy with ice. She thought she saw a figure emerging through the snow, tall and wrapped in thick furs, leading a reindeer by its reins. Was it real, or just her dying mind conjuring hope? Her lips moved, but no sound came. She tried to raise a hand, but it dropped back into the snow. The figure drew closer, the storm howled louder, and Anya's heart beat wildly, caught between death and the faint promise of salvation. And then a shadow fell over her body, blocking the wind. Long before the storm, before betrayal froze her heart harder than the Siberian ice, Anya had lived a life of quiet hopes. She was only 26, a young woman from the small city of Yakutsk, where winters stretched endlessly and summers were too short to melt away loneliness. She had been a schoolteacher, patient and kind, guiding children through their first words and numbers. Her laughter had once filled a classroom, soft and warm like sunlight through frosted windows. She was not wealthy. She never wore fine clothes or jewelry, but she carried herself with the dignity of a woman who knew how to love. Her students adored her, often leaving wildflowers on her desk in spring. Neighbors respected her for her modesty and kindness. But in her private heart, Anya longed for something more: a family, a husband who would treasure her, children who would call her mama. When Sergei entered her life, he seemed like an answer to prayer. He was tall, confident, and charming, a man who spoke of dreams beyond the frozen land. He promised her adventure, security, and above all, eternal love. Anya believed him with the faith of a woman who had never been taught to doubt. Their wedding had been small but joyful, celebrated with laughter, traditional songs, and the warmth of friends gathered in a wooden house against the cold. But marriage was not the fairy tale Anya had imagined. At first, Sergei was gentle. He kissed her forehead before leaving for work, held her hand during walks, and whispered promises at night. Yet slowly, cracks appeared. He grew restless, frustrated by the simple life Anya cherished. He wanted wealth, status, power. To him, teaching children and living in a modest home seemed like chains dragging him down. Anya tried everything to hold their love together. She cooked his favorite meals, sewed his clothes, and listened to his endless complaints. When she discovered she was pregnant, she thought it would save their marriage. She imagined Sergei's joy, his arms lifting her in celebration, his lips pressed against her swollen belly. Instead, his eyes had darkened with disappointment. "We can barely feed ourselves," he muttered, turning away. "A child will only tie us down." Those words had cut her deeper than a knife. But she swallowed her tears and forced herself to smile, whispering to the baby inside her, "You are wanted. You are loved." Through it all, Anya clung to hope. She believed in patience, in sacrifice, in the quiet strength of women who endure storms for the sake of family. Yet she never suspected the true storm was already building inside her home. She never saw the way Sergei's eyes wandered. She never guessed that her best friend Irina had been planting poison in his heart, pretending to comfort while secretly stealing. And now, as snow buried the earth and her body ached with betrayal, all those memories pressed against her chest like shards of glass. But the question burned in her soul. Was she truly as weak and powerless as they believed? Or would this suffering awaken a strength no storm could destroy? The land of Yakutia was both breathtaking and merciless. Mountains rose like frozen giants, their peaks hidden beneath heavy clouds. Endless valleys stretched across the tundra, where reindeer moved like a living sea, their antlers swaying as they trudged through the snow. This was not just a place, it was a world where survival depended on strength, trust, and community. For generations, the Yakut nomads had lived here with their herds of reindeer, moving with the seasons, guided by ancient wisdom passed from elders to children. Their lives were hard, but they were bound together by loyalty, respect, and an unbreakable bond with nature. In winter, they built sturdy tents of reindeer hide, warmed by fires that crackled against the storm. They shared food, sang songs to fight despair, and treated one another like family. It was in this community that Anya had hoped to find shelter during her pregnancy. Sergei had suggested moving there for a while, claiming it would give them a chance to rest before building a future somewhere greater. In truth, he had his eyes on something far darker. The wealth hidden in the herds, the chance to profit from what was not his. But Anya, naive and trusting, believed him. On the night of the betrayal, the village had been alive with celebration. The nomads had gathered around a great bonfire, their drums echoing across the valley, their voices rising in ancient chants. Children danced around the flames while elders told stories of spirits who guarded the mountains. Even the reindeer seemed restless, their hooves beating like distant thunder. Anya had stood quietly at the edge of the gathering, her hands resting on her belly. She felt awkward, uncertain, but also comforted by the warmth of the community. Women smiled at her, offering food and blessings for her unborn child. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to dream of belonging, of raising her baby in a place where love was simple and loyalty meant everything. But under the surface of joy, there was unease. The air felt heavier that night. The snow on the mountain slopes above seemed unstable, as if waiting for one wrong sound to collapse. The elders exchanged worried glances, whispering warnings of an avalanche. The animals sensed it too. The reindeer huddled tightly, their cries carrying an eerie note of fear. Sergei, however, ignored it all. He laughed loudly, drinking with Irina at his side, their whispers disguised as affection for the gathering. While Anya tried to hold her dignity, her husband's distance grew more obvious. Irina's hand lingered on his arm too long, her smile too bright, her presence too close. Some villagers noticed, but they said nothing, unwilling to interfere in another's marriage. Anya felt the sting of shame, her heart pounding as she realized something was slipping beyond her control. She prayed the earth would remain still, that the storm would not fall, that her marriage could be saved. Yet as the fire burned brighter, so did the shadows of betrayal. And far above, the mountain gave a low, rumbling warning of the disaster to come. Sergei had once been the man Anya believed would carry her through life. But behind the charm and broad shoulders was a heart that grew colder with every passing year. To him, love was not a sacred vow, it was a transaction. And in his eyes, Anya had lost her worth the moment she became vulnerable, the moment her belly grew heavy with new life. At the celebration, while villagers laughed and sang, Sergei stood apart, his eyes gleaming not with pride, but with calculation. He had been watching the herds of reindeer for weeks, listening to the whispers about how much they were worth. 10,000 reindeer meant a fortune. Meat, hides, antlers, all things he could sell to traders far away. He saw not the beauty of tradition, but the chance to escape poverty at any cost. Irina stood beside him, her fur-lined coat brushing against his sleeve, her voice low and sweet like honey hiding poison. She had been Anya's closest friend since childhood, sharing secrets, laughter, even dreams of marriage and family. But somewhere along the way, jealousy took root. She envied Anya's gentle heart, the respect she earned without trying, and above all, the bond she had once shared with Sergei. Irina knew how to play her role well. To Anya, she remained the caring friend who always asked about the baby, who offered warm tea and kind words, but behind closed doors, her whispers were venom. Anya is too fragile, she told Sergei. She will drag you down. You deserve a woman strong enough to match your ambition. Sergei listened, his pride swelling. The more Irina fed his ego, the more he drifted away from his wife. Their secret meetings grew bolder, their touches longer, until even the villagers began to notice the unspoken betrayal. Yet no one dared confront them, afraid of shattering the fragile peace. Anya, though blind at first, had begun to feel the cracks. She saw how Sergei no longer looked at her, how his hand never reached for hers, how his voice turned sharp with every word she spoke. She told herself it was stress, the weight of survival, the fear of fatherhood. She clung to the hope that once the baby was born, things would change. But that night, under the glow of the fire, the truth bled through. Sergei's arm slipped easily around Irina's waist as if it belonged there. Irina leaned close, laughing softly, her eyes flashing toward Anya with cruel satisfaction, and Sergei, without shame, allowed the world to see what had been hidden. Anya's heart shattered in silence. She felt the eyes of villagers on her, pitying, avoiding. Her cheeks burned, though the air was freezing. She wanted to scream, to demand why, but her voice locked in her throat. She pressed a hand to her belly, holding on to the only pure love she had left, her unborn child. And as she stood frozen in humiliation, Sergei whispered into Irina's ear, not knowing Anya could see. Soon, everything here will be ours. The bonfire blazed high, sparks flying into the black sky like tiny stars. Drums beat steadily, voices rose in song, and for a moment it seemed as though the storm itself had been forgotten. But for Anya, the warmth of the flames could not reach the chill that spread through her chest. She stood quietly at the edge of the gathering, her breath heavy, her heart pounding with the weight of secrets that were no longer hidden. Irina's laugh sliced through the night, sharp and cruel beneath its sweetness. She leaned into Sergei's side, her hand lingering on his chest as if she owned him. Sergei did not push her away. Instead, he grinned, his arm tightening around her waist. It was not a secret anymore. It was a performance. They wanted everyone to see. A hush fell over the villagers closest to them. Conversation stopped, eyes turned, and slowly whispers began to ripple through the crowd. Some looked away, ashamed for Anya. Others shook their heads, disapproving of such bold betrayal. But no one stepped forward. No one dared to speak. Anya felt her knees weaken, her vision blur. The humiliation pressed down on her like a physical weight. She pressed her hands protectively over her belly, as if shielding her unborn child from the shame she could not escape. Her throat tightened, and tears burned her eyes. She tried to hold them back, but one slipped free, glittering in the firelight before freezing against her cheek. Irina's gaze found her, their eyes locked. And in that single glance, Anya saw the truth. There was no shame, no guilt, no regret, only triumph. Irina smirked, tilting her head slightly, as if to say, I have taken everything from you. The music faltered, the drumming slowed. The villagers waited, watching for Sergei to explain, to deny, to at least show some decency. But Sergei only raised his cup, his voice loud and mocking. Why should I pretend anymore? He shouted. I will not waste my life chained to weakness. I deserve more, and I have found it. His words stabbed through Anya's heart. Gasps rose from the crowd, some of shock, some of anger. A few elders muttered about dishonor, but still no one defended her. The fire cracked loudly, as if the earth itself recoiled at his cruelty. Anya's lips trembled. She wanted to scream, to fight, to tell them all what he truly was, but the words would not come. She stood frozen, her hands trembling, the life inside her kicking as though it too sensed the danger. Sergei lifted Irina's hand high in the air like a prize, his face twisted with arrogance. Irina leaned into him, smiling proudly, her eyes never leaving Anya's. The humiliation was complete. And then, as if fate itself wanted to etch this moment into eternity, the mountain above gave a low, thunderous groan. The ground trembled beneath their feet. The villagers gasped, their eyes darting toward the slopes. Snow shifted dangerously, ready to fall. But even as the threat of an avalanche loomed, Sergei's voice rang louder than the storm. "From this night forward," he declared, "Anya means nothing to me." The storm returned with a vengeance that night. As if the heavens themselves raged against betrayal, the bonfire had burned low, its embers struggling against the icy wind. Villagers hurried to secure their tents, to calm their restless reindeer, to brace for what they feared would come down from the mountain. But amid the chaos, Anya's world collapsed in silence. Sergei's declaration still echoed in her ears. "Anya means nothing to me." Words spoken so loudly, so cruelly, that no one could pretend not to hear. Every syllable had been a knife, cutting her open for all to see. And now, while the villagers scattered, Sergei stood with Irina by his side, their silhouettes framed by the flickering firelight. Anya staggered forward, clutching her belly. Her voice trembled as she begged, "Sergei, please, I am carrying your child. Do not do this." For a moment, she thought he might turn, that some shred of humanity remained. But Sergei only sneered, his breath a white mist in the air. "That child is nothing but a chain. I will not be shackled by weakness." Irina slipped her arm through his, her smile cruel and victorious. "Come, Sergei. Let her fend for herself. She chose this path." The final thread snapped inside Anya's heart. She reached out a trembling hand, but Sergei brushed it away as if she were nothing more than a burden. Then, without another glance, he walked into the swirling snow with Irina clinging to him, their figures swallowed by the storm. The world around her spun. The drums of the celebration had gone silent, leaving only the howl of the wind and the cries of frightened reindeer. Anya fell to her knees in the snow, her body shaking violently. She pressed both hands over her swollen belly, whispering through sobs, "Hold on, my child, hold on." The cold bit into her skin, crawling through her bones. Each breath burned her lungs, each heartbeat weaker than the last. The villagers avoided her eyes, some whispering pity, others turning away in fear of becoming part of her tragedy. No one reached out a hand. She was alone. Snow swirled higher, stinging her face, covering her like a shroud. The mountain rumbled again, louder this time, sending a shiver through the valley. Still, Anya did not move. She had no strength left. Her tears froze before they could fall, tiny crystals clinging to her lashes. Her vision blurred. She saw flashes of her past, her classroom filled with laughing children, her wedding day, Sergei's first promises. Each memory dissolved into the storm, leaving only emptiness. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled, and she collapsed onto the frozen ground. The darkness pressed closer, and for the first time, Anya feared she would never rise again. Her lips moved in prayer, but no sound came. Her body trembled violently, then grew frighteningly still. Above her, the mountain gave one last thunderous roar. The avalanche was near, and as the snow began to bury her, Anya's world faded to white. The storm howled like a beast unleashed, devouring everything in its path. Anya lay motionless in the snow, her breath shallow, her body sinking deeper into the frozen ground. The bitter cold wrapped around her like a coffin, and her mind drifted between moments of pain and the soft pull of oblivion. Her eyes fluttered open, seeing nothing but endless white. The snow fell heavier, each flake a weight pressing her further down. She tried to move her hand, but her fingers had gone numb, stiff like carved wood. Her lips parted, but only a faint whisper escaped. "Sergei?" The name fell into the storm, unheard, forgotten. She realized then that even if he could hear, he would never return. He had chosen Irina, chosen greed, chosen betrayal. She was nothing to him. That truth cut deeper than the ice surrounding her. Her body trembled as another contraction rippled through her, sharp and merciless. She clutched her belly, panic surging through her fading strength. "Not now," she pleaded to the life within. "Please, not now. Stay with me. Mama is still here." But her voice was weak, swallowed instantly by the blizzard. The darkness in her vision grew wider, threatening to consume her. She thought of the classroom she once loved, of the children who brought her flowers, of the laughter she believed she would share with her own baby. Those dreams now felt like cruel illusions, snatched away by fate. The rumble of the mountain echoed again, louder this time. The avalanche was close. Fear clutched her heart, but strangely it was not for herself. It was for the tiny heartbeat inside her, the child who had not yet seen the world. Tears welled in her eyes, freezing before they could fall. Her mind drifted. She saw her mother's face, long gone but still warm in memory, whispering, "Anya, you are stronger than you believe." She wanted to believe it, but the weight of the storm crushed every spark of strength she had left. Her breathing slowed. The cold no longer hurt, it numbed. It tempted her, pulling her into a quiet peace. Perhaps, she thought, it would be easier to let go, to stop fighting, to surrender to the white silence. But then faintly a sound reached her ears. Different from the howling wind, steadier than the storm. Hooves. Reindeer hooves pounding against the snow, deliberate and close. Her eyes flickered open, struggling to focus. Through the blur of ice, she saw a shadow moving toward her. A tall figure wrapped in thick furs, leading a reindeer by the reins. The figure pushed forward against the blizzard with determined steps, each movement purposeful. Anya's lips trembled. Was it real? Or just her mind weaving comfort before the end? She tried to raise her hand, but it fell back into the snow. The shadow grew closer. She felt a sudden rush of heat, hope, fragile but real, rising in her chest. And just before the darkness consumed her, she saw the figure kneel beside her, strong hands lifting her out of the snow. The world was fading when Anya felt herself being lifted. Her frozen body pressed against something solid and warm. Strong arms wrapped around her, steady and sure, shielding her from the merciless wind. The faint scent of smoke and leather filled her lungs, breaking through the numbness that had nearly claimed her. For the first time that night, she was not alone. "Hold on." A deep voice rumbled through the storm. "You're safe now. I've got you." Her vision blurred, but she managed to catch glimpses of the man carrying her. His face was partly hidden by a fur hood, his beard frosted with ice, his eyes sharp and steady against the blizzard. He moved with the confidence of someone born in this land, someone who knew how to fight the cold and win. Beside him, a reindeer followed obediently, its breath steaming in the air. The man was Doran, the nomadic herder known among his people for his quiet strength. He had been guiding his animals back toward the village when he saw a dark shape in the snow. At first, he thought it was a lost animal, but as he drew closer, he saw a woman collapsed, barely clinging to life. The sight shook him. No one survived long in such conditions, not without help. Doran pulled her closer, feeling the frailty of her body beneath the weight of pregnancy. His jaw tightened. Whoever had left her here had done so to die. His people valued life, even in the harshest winters, and to abandon a pregnant woman was unthinkable. He adjusted her carefully onto the reindeer's back, wrapping her in his heavy cloak to shield her from the storm. The reindeer snorted and shifted, but Doran steadied it with a firm hand. Then, walking beside them, he began the long trek back to the safety of his tent. Anya stirred weakly, her lips moving. "Please, my child." Her voice was faint, almost lost in the wind, but Doran leaned closer. "Your child will live," he said firmly. "You both will." The words were like fire in her frozen veins. She closed her eyes again, clinging to the sound of his promise. The journey was brutal. Snow piled high, the wind tore at them with savage claws, and the distant roar of the mountain threatened disaster at any moment. But Doran pushed forward, step after step, his determination unshaken. He knew the path, knew where the snow lay thin, where the ice could break. Every instinct, every lesson from his ancestors guided him as he carried the fragile woman and her unborn child through the storm. Finally, the glow of firelight appeared through the white haze. His tent stood sturdy against the wind, smoke curling upward from the fire inside. Relief filled his chest as he pushed open the flap and guided the reindeer inside the sheltered pen. He laid Anya gently onto a bed of furs near the fire, her pale face flickering in the warm light. For the first time since the storm began, her lips trembled into something resembling peace. And as Doran knelt beside her, watching her chest rise faintly with breath, he vowed silently, whoever had abandoned her would one day answer for this. Warmth. That was the first thing Anya felt when she opened her eyes again. Not the burning sting of the storm, but a gentle heat that wrapped around her like an embrace. A fire crackled nearby, its orange glow casting soft light across the tent. The thick furs beneath her cushioned her aching body, and the bitter taste of snow was gone from her lips. For a moment she wondered if she was dreaming. Then she heard the low sound of humming. Turning her head weakly, she saw Doran crouched by the fire, stirring a pot that filled the air with the scent of herbs and broth. His broad shoulders were relaxed, his movements steady, but his eyes flicked toward her the instant he sensed she was awake. "You're alive," he said simply, his voice calm yet firm. "I wasn't sure you would make it." Anya tried to speak, but her throat was raw. Doran quickly poured water into a wooden cup and helped her sit up enough to drink. The liquid was cool, soothing, and she managed a faint whisper. "My baby?" He placed a hand near her belly, not touching, but close enough to feel the faint movement beneath the furs. "Still strong," he reassured her. "Your child is a fighter, like you." Tears welled in Anya's eyes. For hours, maybe days, she had believed she and her unborn child would be swallowed by the snow. Now, against all odds, they lived. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. Doran shook his head. "Thank the spirits. They led me to you." But in his eyes there was something more than duty, something that said he could not have walked past her even if the world demanded it. He handed her a bowl of steaming broth. The warmth seeped into her hands as she held it, trembling. She drank slowly, the taste simple yet healing. With each sip, life returned to her limbs, color to her cheeks, strength to her voice. As the storm raged outside, Doran kept the fire alive and added more furs around her. He checked her often, ensuring she was warm, fed, and safe. Though his words were few, every action spoke louder than Sergei's empty promises ever had. For the first time in months, Anya felt seen, not as a burden, but as someone worth saving. Still, the shadows of betrayal lingered. When she closed her eyes, she saw Sergei's smirk, Irina's triumph, the humiliation of that night. The memories cut deep, but each time despair threatened, she felt the fire's warmth and Doran's steady presence beside her. A fragile hope flickered inside her heart, refusing to be extinguished. Outside, the mountain groaned again, a grim reminder that danger was not gone. The avalanche still threatened the village and the 10,000 reindeer in the valley. Survival for all was uncertain. Yet here, in this small circle of warmth, Anya realized something powerful. She had not died. She had been given a second chance. And as she lay back against the furs, listening to the storm fade just slightly, Anya felt the first spark of strength returning, a strength that would soon change everything. The storm did not rest. Even as Anya regained fragments of her strength inside Doran's tent, the earth itself seemed restless, grumbling beneath layers of snow. Each night, the wind screamed against the mountains, rattling the tents, making even the strongest herders glance toward the slopes with unease. Something vast and merciless was waiting above them. Doran listened carefully to the land. He was a man who had grown up with the rhythms of nature, and he could feel when the balance had shifted. The snowpack on the mountain was unstable, layered, and heavy. One tremor, one crack, one loud sound could unleash an avalanche big enough to bury everything in its path. The herds, the tents, even the lives of every man, woman, and child in the valley. The villagers sensed it too. They moved their reindeer closer together, their voices lower than usual, their laughter silenced. Children were told not to wander, dogs barked nervously through the night, and elders whispered prayers to the spirits. Yet, despite the looming danger, life went on. They had no choice. Survival demanded work, and work demanded courage. Anya sat by the fire, listening to the warnings in hushed voices. Her body was still weak, but her mind sharpened with every passing hour. She looked at Doran, saw the quiet concern etched into his features as he checked the skies and studied the slopes. He carried the weight of responsibility not just for her, but for his entire people. "Is it truly that bad?" she asked one evening, her voice still hoarse. Doran met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "Yes, the mountain is restless. If it falls, we will have little time." The thought sent a chill through her that no fire could warm. She wrapped her arms protectively around her belly, feeling the baby's small movements inside. For herself, she might have surrendered to despair. But for her child, she knew she could not. Still, shadows haunted her. She remembered Sergei's voice, loud and cruel, and Irina's smirk under the firelight. Were they still in the village, pretending loyalty to the people while secretly feeding their own greed? Or had they already planned their escape, leaving others to face the avalanche alone? Anya's jaw tightened. Whatever their plan, she knew their betrayal was not finished. That night, as the storm quieted briefly, the sound came, deep, hollow, terrifying. The mountain roared like a living beast, a thunderous crack that shook the valley. The ground trembled. Snow slid down the slopes in sheets, though not yet the full avalanche. People rushed from their tents, torches raised, shouting warnings. The reindeer bellowed, stamping and pulling at their tethers, sensing disaster. Anya clutched Doran's arm, her eyes wide with fear. He steadied her with a single look, calm but resolute. "This is only the beginning," he said. "The mountain will not forgive us. We must be ready." In that moment, surrounded by the frightened cries of villagers and the restless herd, Anya understood. Survival would demand more than strength. It would demand unity, courage, and truth. And deep in her heart, she feared Sergei's lies would destroy them all before the avalanche ever could. The days that followed were tense, every sunrise bringing fresh dread. The villagers moved cautiously, keeping their reindeer close, preparing for the worst. Anya stayed in Doran's tent, her body recovering but her spirit restless. She had begun to trust the steady rhythm of his presence, the quiet strength that wrapped around her like an unseen shield. For the first time since Sergei's betrayal, she felt almost safe. But safety never lasted long. It was during a rare in the storm when he returned, Sergei. His tall frame emerged from the curtain of snow, Irina clinging to his side, their faces pale but proud. The villagers turned at once, their eyes narrowing, whispers rising like sparks from dry wood. None had forgotten the spectacle Sergei made, the way he had humiliated his pregnant wife before the firelight. His sudden reappearance felt less like redemption and more like a shadow falling over the fragile calm. Anya's heart jolted painfully. She sat up as Sergei pushed through the circle of tents, his eyes scanning until they landed on her. For a brief moment, he wore the mask of a husband, concern painted across his face, his arms opening as if to embrace. "Anya," he called, loud enough for everyone to hear. "My love, I've been searching for you. I thought I lost you in the storm. Thank God you're alive." The audacity of his words made her stomach twist. She stared at him, unable to move, her mind flashing with memories of him walking away, Irina's smirk, the cold emptiness of betrayal. Doran stepped forward, placing himself subtly between Anya and Sergei. His voice was firm even. "She survived because she was found, not because you cared." A ripple of murmurs swept through the villagers. Sergei's jaw tightened, but he forced a smile, the mask of charm slipping only slightly. "You misunderstand. I was confused that night. The storm was fierce. I made mistakes, but I am here now to take care of my wife and child." Irina clutched his arm, her eyes darting nervously at the crowd. She was less convincing, her smirk replaced with a forced sweetness. "Yes, Anya, you know how much I care for you. We were only trying to keep the herd safe. That's why we left. Please forgive us." The villagers exchanged doubtful looks. Some crossed their arms, others shook their heads. They were not fools. They had seen enough betrayal in their lives to recognize its stink. Still, no one spoke openly against Sergei. Not yet. Anya's lips trembled, but before she could answer, Doran said firmly, "She owes you nothing. You left her to die." The tension cut through the air like a blade. Sergei's smile faltered, his eyes flashing with anger. He wanted to lash out, but too many eyes were on him. So instead, he bowed his head slightly, playing the role of a humbled husband. But as he straightened, his gaze flicked toward the herds in the valley, gleaming with something darker than love. And Anya realized with a chill, Sergei hadn't returned for her. He had returned for the reindeer. The morning after Sergei's return, the village felt colder, though the storm outside had eased. Anya sat by the fire in Doran's tent, her hands folded protectively over her belly. She had not slept, haunted by the sight of Sergei's false smile and the dangerous gleam in his eyes. But worse than Sergei's return was the woman at his side, Irina. Irina entered the tent without asking, her boots crunching softly against the furs. She carried a wooden bowl of soup, steam rising into the air. Her face was arranged into the shape of kindness, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of triumph. "Anya," she said sweetly, her voice dripping with practiced concern. "I brought you something warm. You must be so weak after everything." She knelt beside her, holding out the bowl as though she were a loyal friend. Anya hesitated. The memories of childhood, laughter, secrets, promises of lifelong friendship, warred against the bitter truth. This was the same woman who had smirked as Sergei abandoned her, who had whispered poison into his ear. To take food from her hand felt like swallowing betrayal itself. "I don't need anything from you," Anya said softly but firmly. Irina's smile froze for a moment, but she quickly recovered. She set the bowl down beside Anya anyway. "Don't be stubborn. You're carrying Sergei's child. You must stay strong." Her words were gentle, but they carried a cruel reminder. Sergei's child, as if to stamp ownership where love had failed. Doran entered then, his broad figure filling the doorway. His eyes narrowed at Irina, reading the truth beneath her mask. "She has enough care here," he said flatly. "You can leave." Irina stood slowly, brushing the furs from her coat. Her smile didn't falter, but her voice grew sharper. "You think you can protect her forever? She belongs with her husband. Sergei will decide what happens to her, not you." The words stung, but Anya's heart hardened. Belonging. That was what Irina had always wanted. To take, to claim, to own what wasn't hers. And now she clung to Sergei as proof that she had won. Later, as Irina left the tent, she paused in the doorway, her voice low enough for only Anya to hear. "You should be grateful, Anya. If not for me, Sergei would have left long ago. I gave him a reason to stay." The venom in her whisper made Anya's blood run cold. She wanted to scream, to strike, to throw the bowl of soup at her false friend. But she remained silent, her hand pressed against her belly, reminding herself she was no longer just fighting for her dignity, she was fighting for her child's future. When the flap closed behind Irina, Doran placed another log on the fire. "Her words mean nothing," he said quietly, his eyes steady on Anya's, "but they reveal everything. Stay alert, they are not done with their lies." Anya nodded, her heart pounding. She knew now more than ever that Sergei and Irina's return carried danger beyond betrayal. And as the flames crackled, she realized their kindness was only a disguise, one that would soon be torn away. The storm outside calmed for a brief moment, but inside the village, a new storm brewed. Quiet, dangerous, and made of lies. Anya had sensed it from the moment Sergei returned. His smile was too polished, his words too rehearsed, and his sudden concern for her rang false in every ear. She knew him better than anyone. He had not come back for her or their unborn child. He had come back with a plan. It was late one night when the truth surfaced. Doran had gone out to check the reindeer pens, ensuring the animals remained calm as the mountain growled above them. Anya lay resting inside, the fire crackling low when she heard voices outside the tent. She recognized them instantly, Sergei and Irina. She froze, straining to listen. 10,000 reindeer, Sergei whispered, his tone sharp with greed. "Do you realize what that's worth, Irina? Meat, hides, antlers, all of it could make us rich, far beyond this frozen wasteland. Traders in the south will pay fortunes." Irina's laugh was soft and poisonous. "And what of Anya? She will expose you if you're not careful. The villagers already doubt you." Sergei's voice hardened. "Anya means nothing. She's weak, always has been. I'll convince the villagers I've returned for her, play the grieving husband, and when the time is right, we'll take what we want. No one will stop us." Anya's chest tightened, her breath shallow. Her worst fears had been true. Sergei had abandoned her once for Irina's arms, and now he had returned not out of guilt, but ambition. His heart was colder than the Siberian winter, and his greed knew no bounds. Irina's tone shifted, sly and coaxing. "But Doran stands in your way. He protects her. The people trust him. If he exposes you, they'll turn against us." Sergei spat into the snow. "Then we make him the villain. We'll whisper that he covets my wife, that he seeks to take my place. By the time anyone realizes the truth, it will be too late." Anya's stomach churned. Rage and sorrow twisted together inside her, but she stayed silent, clinging to the shadows of the tent. If they knew she had overheard, her life, and her child's, would be in even greater danger. The footsteps faded into the storm, leaving only silence. Anya pressed her hands against her belly, her body trembling. The betrayal was no longer private, it was a danger to the entire village. The herds, the people, the traditions of generations were all at stake. Sergei's plan would not just destroy her, it would destroy everything. When Doran returned, brushing snow from his shoulders, he found her pale and shaken. She told him everything in a trembling voice, each word slicing the air like a blade. His expression hardened, his jaw tightening with fury. "They will not take what belongs to my people," he vowed. "And they will not hurt you again." Anya gripped his hand, her heart pounding with fear and hope. She knew now the fight ahead would not be just for survival, but for truth. And in that moment, a spark ignited. She would no longer be only the abandoned wife. She would become the voice that exposed them. Morning came with a pale, weak sun casting silver light over the snow. The villagers gathered near the center of the camp, their faces weary from sleepless nights, their eyes darting toward the mountain that rumbled above them. Fear hung heavy in the air, but so did suspicion. Whispers about Sergei's sudden return had spread, twisting through every tent like smoke. Anya stood at the edge of the circle, her body trembling, not from the cold, but from the storm inside her heart. For days she had been silent, her shame keeping her in the shadows. But now she carried more than humiliation. She carried the truth. Sergei's lies threatened not only her, but the lives of everyone here. And if she stayed quiet, the avalanche outside would not be the only disaster. Doran stood beside her, steady as a mountain. His presence was an anchor, but the decision to speak was hers alone. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the small kick of life within, and drew a breath that shook her chest. "I have something to say," she called out, her voice louder than she thought possible. Heads turned, conversations hushed. For the first time, all eyes were on her, not with pity, but with anticipation. Sergei's face darkened. He stepped forward, his smile strained. "Anya, my love, there's no need to." "Don't call me that," she cut in, her voice steady now. The words hung in the frozen air, sharp as glass. "You abandoned me in the storm. You left me to die with your child inside me. And now you stand here pretending you returned for me? That is a lie." Gasps rippled through the villagers. Irina stiffened at Sergei's side, her false sweetness cracking into alarm. Sergei tried to laugh, but it rang hollow. "She's confused. The storm, the cold, it's affected her mind." "No," Anya said firmly, louder this time. "I heard you. I heard your plan. You don't care about me. You don't care about this village. You only care about the reindeer, the wealth you think you can steal. You plan to sell them and run." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Some glared at Sergei, others looked to the elders. The air grew heavier with tension. Sergei's mask finally slipped. His eyes burned with fury, his jaw clenched. "She lies. Doran has poisoned her against me. He covets her. He wants to steal her from me." The villagers looked between them, uncertain. Doran stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. "If I had not found her, she would be dead. Ask yourselves, what husband abandons his pregnant wife in the snow? What friend smirks as she collapses?" His gaze cut toward Irina, whose face flushed crimson. The truth weighed on the people. They had seen Sergei's arrogance, Irina's shamelessness. Now, hearing Anya's words, doubt hardened into belief. Anya lifted her chin, her eyes shining with tears she refused to shed. "I am not weak. I may have been silent before, but not anymore. I will not let his lies destroy us." And as the villagers' murmurs turned into angry voices against Sergei, Anya realized she had finally reclaimed her voice, and with it, her power. The air was thick with tension after Anya's words. Sergei's mask had slipped, and the villagers were no longer fooled by Irina's sweet lies. Anger stirred in their voices. But before judgment could fall, the mountain decided its own verdict. A sound tore through the valley, deep, thunderous, unnatural. It was as if the sky itself cracked open. The ground shook, knocking people to their knees. Children screamed, reindeer bellowed, dogs barked wildly. Every head turned toward the slopes above, where a wall of white roared down with terrifying speed. "The avalanche," someone shouted. Panic exploded through the camp. Villagers rushed to untether reindeer, to grab children, to flee toward higher ground. Snow thundered down like a beast, devouring trees, crushing rocks, swallowing everything in its path. The air filled with choking powder, blinding and suffocating. Anya clutched her belly, frozen in terror. Her body screamed at her to run, but her legs would not move. The sight was too overwhelming, the sound too deafening. All she could think of was her unborn child, trapped inside her body as death rushed closer. Doran seized her arm. "Come," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. He pulled her to her feet, guiding her toward the edge of the camp, where the land rose slightly. His grip was strong, his steps sure, but the avalanche was faster. Behind them, Tents collapsed under the weight of snow. Villagers cried out as they stumbled through drifts that rose higher by the second. A group of men tried to lead the herd away, but many animals panicked, their antlers clashing as they stampeded blindly. Irina shrieked, stumbling as Sergei dragged her by the arm. He looked less like a man saving his lover and more like a thief clutching stolen treasure. His eyes darted not toward the villagers in need, but toward the herd, calculating how much he could still take. Even in disaster, greed burned brighter than fear. The snow roared closer, the sound deafening like drums of war. Doran pushed Anya ahead, shielding her with his own body. She stumbled, falling to her knees, but he lifted her again, refusing to let her be buried. "One more step, Anya. Don't stop," he urged. Suddenly a child's cry pierced the storm of noise. A little boy had fallen, trapped under a broken tent pole, his tiny arms flailing. His mother screamed, but couldn't reach him. Without hesitation, Anya tore away from Doran's grasp. Her body moved before her mind could stop it. She waded through the snow, her hands clawing at the frozen fabric. Pain seared through her belly, but she pulled with all her strength, freeing the boy just as the avalanche slammed into the edge of the camp. Doran grabbed them both, yanking them up the slope as the wave of snow swallowed everything behind them. They collapsed on a ridge, gasping for air, coated in white. The camp below was nearly gone, buried beneath tons of ice and snow. The cries of survivors mixed with the silence of those who would never rise again. And as Anya held the sobbing boy against her chest, she realized this avalanche had not only destroyed the village, it had shattered every last illusion of safety. The avalanche left behind silence so heavy it pressed on the chest. The once lively camp was buried beneath mountains of snow, broken wood, and shattered lives. Smoke from crushed fires curled weakly into the gray sky, and the cries of survivors echoed like ghosts across the valley. What had been a home for hundreds of people and thousands of reindeer was now a graveyard. Anya sat on the ridge, her body trembling, the rescued boy clinging to her side. Her heart pounded with both terror and disbelief. She was alive. Her baby was alive. But below, so many were gone. She turned her head and saw Doran standing tall, his eyes scanning the destruction with grim determination. "We can't stay here," he said, his voice rough but steady. "The snow will shift again. Those who survived must move now." Word spread quickly. Villagers stumbled up the ridge, carrying children, supporting the wounded, their faces pale with shock. Some led reindeer that had broken free, others carried only what they could grab in the panic. They gathered around Doran instinctively, their trust in him clear. In times of disaster, true leaders rose, and he was the one they looked to now. Anya forced herself to her feet, holding the little boy's hand. "What can I do?" she asked, her voice weak but determined. Doran's gaze softened for a moment, then hardened again with urgency. "Help the women and children. Keep them moving. Do not look back." Together they began the painful march away from the destroyed camp. The snow was deep, every step exhausting, but fear fueled their strength. Behind them, the mountain rumbled again, a reminder that death still lingered above. As they moved, Anya saw Sergei and Irina among the survivors. Sergei dragged a bundle of supplies, his eyes darting toward the herd that had scattered in panic. Even now, he thought of wealth. He barely spared a glance at the injured villagers, and when a woman begged for help to carry her wounded husband, Sergei brushed past her as though she were invisible. Irina clung to him, her face pale but her voice sharp. "We can't waste time on them, Sergei. We have to save ourselves." The words burned in Anya's ears. She wanted to shout the truth again, to expose them further, but she bit back her rage. Survival came first. Justice would come later. Hours passed as the group trudged through the snow, led by Doran's sure instincts. He guided them toward a rocky outcrop where the land rose higher, safer from shifting snow. There, the survivors collapsed in exhaustion, their breaths clouding the frozen air. Anya sank onto a fur laid out by one of the women, her body aching, her baby kicking weakly inside. She closed her eyes, fighting tears. They had lost everything, their homes, their security, but they had each other. And in that, there was still hope. Doran stood at the edge of the group, his figure outlined against the bleak sky. "We are alive," he said firmly, his voice carrying over the huddled villagers. "And as long as we live, we will rebuild. But we must stay together. That is our only chance." Anya looked at him then, and for the first time since her world shattered, she believed survival was possible. The survivors huddled together beneath the rocky outcrop, their breaths rising in misty clouds, their bodies shivering beneath blankets of fur. Fear lingered in the air, but there was also unity. Stripped of possessions, they leaned on one another for strength, guided by Doran's steady hand. But among them were two who did not share that spirit, Sergei and Irina. While the villagers mourned their dead and tended the wounded, Sergei's eyes remained fixed on the horizon. His thoughts were not of rebuilding or survival, but of escape. He clutched the bundle of supplies he had saved, treating it like treasure. Inside were furs, dried meat, and most importantly, a map he had stolen from the elders, one that marked hidden trade routes leading south. Irina crouched beside him, her face pale but her eyes gleaming. "When will we go?" she whispered urgently. "The others will stay here, wasting time. But we can leave, Sergei. We can find traders, sell what's left of the herd and start over, rich, free." Sergei smirked, his pride swelling even in the face of disaster. "Soon. Let them cling to hope. By the time they realize we're gone, we'll be far away." What they didn't know was that Anya, resting nearby with the little boy she had saved, heard every word. Her heart pounded, but she said nothing. She knew Sergei's greed would be his undoing. That night, while the others slept, Sergei and Irina made their move. They slipped away from the camp, carrying their stolen supplies, leaving behind the people who had once trusted them. The snow crunched beneath their boots as they trudged into the wilderness, the storm quiet but the cold merciless. For a while, they believed fortune favored them. The map guided their steps, and Irina clung to Sergei, whispering of the life they would build together. But as hours passed, the truth of the land revealed itself. The snow grew deeper, the wind sharper, and the paths marked on the map were buried beneath shifting ice. Their supplies, heavy at first, became a burden. Irina stumbled often, and Sergei cursed her weakness. "You're slowing us down," he snapped, dragging her forward. "I'm freezing, Sergei," she cried, her lips blue. "We should have stayed with the others." "Stay with them and starve?" he spat. "No, I will not be poor. I will not live like them." But pride could not warm his body or feed his hunger. By dawn, the stolen supplies were nearly gone. The reindeer they hoped to find had scattered far from the avalanche's path, and no traders roamed this cursed land. They were alone, truly alone. Back at the survivors' camp, the villagers discovered their absence. Murmurs spread quickly, anger mixing with relief. "Let them go," one elder said grimly. "The mountain takes those who betray their own." Anya listened in silence, her hand on her belly. For once, she felt no pain at Sergei's betrayal, only certainty that justice was already on its way. Days later, searchers would find only remnants, a torn fur coat, footprints swallowed by snow, and silence where Sergei's arrogance once roared. And Anya knew then that the land itself had passed judgment. Sergei and Irina had been swallowed by the very wilderness they thought to conquer. The days after the avalanche were filled with hardship. The villagers had little food, fewer supplies, and no permanent shelter. Yet amidst the loss, there was resilience. They built temporary camps, shared what little remained, and leaned on each other as families bound not by blood, but by survival. And within this fragile circle of life, Anya felt a change stirring inside her, not just in her body, but in her soul. She had carried her child through betrayal, abandonment, and near death. Now, with Sergei and Irina gone, she no longer felt the heavy chains of humiliation dragging her down. She was free. But with freedom came the weight of new responsibility. She was about to bring life into a world that had nearly crushed her. One cold night, as the aurora shimmered faintly across the sky, pain struck suddenly. It was sharp, searing, undeniable. Anya cried out, clutching her belly. Women rushed to her side at once, their faces urgent but calm. They guided her into a small tent warmed by fire and lined with furs. The time had come. Fear and hope collided within her chest. She remembered Sergei's cruel words, "That child will only tie us down," and the way he had turned his back on her. For a moment, panic threatened to drown her. Could she do this alone? Could she bring a child into such a broken world? Then she heard the gentle voice of an elder woman at her side. "You are not alone, Anya. We are with you, and your child will be born into hands that will never abandon you." Tears streamed down her cheeks. She gripped the woman's hand tightly, whispering, "Please, Let my baby live." The hours that followed were filled with agony. Waves of pain crashed through her, each one leaving her gasping for air. Sweat covered her brow despite the cold, and her cries echoed through the night. But each time she thought she would break, she heard the voices of the women around her, steady and encouraging. And outside the tent, Doran kept watch, his face grim but his heart silently praying for her and the child he had come to care for as his own. At last a final cry tore from her lips, followed by the most fragile sound of all, the thin, trembling wail of new life. The tent filled with relief and joy as the elder lifted the newborn, wrapped in soft furs, and placed the child gently into Anya's arms. Her heart swelled with emotions too vast for words. She gazed at the tiny face, the small fists clenched tight, the breath so delicate yet so fierce. "My child," she whispered through tears, "you are my strength. You are why I survived." The women around her smiled, some wiping their own tears. Outside, word spread quickly, and despite their hunger and fear, the villagers rejoiced. A child had been born, not just any child, but one who symbolized hope, rising from the ruins of despair. Doran entered quietly, kneeling beside her. His eyes softened as he looked at the baby, then at Anya. "You both are miracles," he said, and as Anya cradled her newborn against her chest, she felt reborn herself, no longer the abandoned wife, but the mother who had carried life through the storm. The newborn slept soundly against Anya's chest, wrapped in layers of fur, his tiny breaths warm against her skin. Outside, the wind howled, as if testing the fragile peace within the tent. But for the first time in months, Anya felt calm. Every rise and fall of her baby's chest reminded her that life had triumphed against impossible odds. Doran entered quietly, his tall frame casting a shadow over the firelight. He had stood guard all night, allowing no one to disturb mother and child. His eyes softened when they fell on Anya, then moved gently to the sleeping infant. For a moment, he said nothing. His silence carried a weight of respect, as if he were standing before something sacred. "You should rest," he said finally, his voice low and steady. Anya shook her head, exhaustion lining her face but strength burning in her eyes. "I cannot. Not while so much is uncertain. My child depends on me, on all of us." Doran stepped closer, kneeling beside her. "And you will not face it alone, not anymore." Her gaze met his, uncertain yet searching. "Why?" she whispered. "Why risk so much for me? You owe me nothing." He hesitated, then spoke with a quiet honesty that carried more weight than any vow. "Because I know what it means to lose. Years ago I had a wife. We dreamed of raising children together among the reindeer. But a harsh winter took her from me before that dream could live. Since then I have carried her memory and the silence she left behind." His eyes grew distant, then focused again, fierce with conviction. "When I found you in the snow, I swore I would not let another life slip away. Not yours, not your child's." Anya's throat tightened. She reached out, her hand trembling, and placed it gently over his. The warmth of his skin grounded her in a way she had not felt since before betrayal shattered her world. "You have already given us more than I ever thought possible," she said, her voice breaking. "You gave us life when Sergei left us for death." At the mention of Sergei, bitterness flickered across Doran's features, but he did not dwell on it. Instead, he leaned closer, his tone steady as stone. "Anya, listen to me. I cannot change what was done to you, but I can make you a promise. From this day forward, I will stand beside you. I will protect your child as if he were my own blood. And I will protect you, not because you are weak, but because you are stronger than anyone I have ever known, and you deserve to never fight alone again." Tears spilled down Anya's cheeks. For so long, she had been abandoned, betrayed, treated as a burden. Now, someone offered not pity, but partnership. It felt like a lifeline thrown into a sea she thought would drown her. She nodded, her lips trembling into a faint smile. "Then I accept, not just for me, but for him." She looked down at her son, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the vow just made. And as Doran's hand closed firmly over hers, Anya knew this promise was more than words. It was the foundation of the future they would build together. Morning broke slowly over the tundra, painting the snow in shades of gold and silver. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a silence that was not heavy with despair, but alive with renewal. From the ridge, survivors looked out over the land. Though the avalanche had taken their homes and much of their herd, life remained. And where life remained, so did hope. Anya stepped from the tent, her newborn bundled tightly against her chest. The child stirred softly, his breath visible in the cold air, and she kissed his tiny forehead. Every villager turned as she emerged, their tired faces softening into smiles. For them, this baby was more than a child. It was proof that even after destruction, new beginnings could rise. Doran stood beside her, tall and unshaken, his presence like the mountain itself. He looked at the people gathered and spoke with a voice that carried across the frozen valley. "We have suffered. We have lost, but we are not broken. Together we will rebuild. Together we will survive." The villagers murmured in agreement, their fear replaced with determination. Some began planning to gather scattered reindeer, others to construct new shelters from what little could be salvaged. There was no luxury, no wealth, but there was unity. Anya felt strength flow into her as she looked around. These were the people who had seen her at her lowest, who had witnessed her humiliation, her near death, and her rebirth. They no longer saw her as the abandoned wife, but as a woman who had endured and risen stronger. Sergei and Irina were gone, swallowed by the same wilderness they had tried to exploit. No villager mourned them. Their greed had destroyed them, and their absence was a lesson written in the snow. Betrayal has no place among those who fight for each other's lives. Anya lifted her son slightly, so all could see him. "He is proof that we endure," she said, her voice trembling yet strong. "When I thought I would die, when I believed all hope was gone, I found the strength to keep fighting, for him. And now, for all of us, I say this: we will not be defined by what we lost, but by what we choose to build again." Tears glistened in the eyes of the villagers. Some clapped softly, others bowed their heads in respect. For a moment, grief gave way to something brighter. Unity, pride, and the quiet certainty that they had a future. Doran placed his hand gently on Anya's shoulder, steady and warm. She turned to him, and in his eyes she saw not pity but promise. He had already given her his vow, but now she understood something deeper. Together, they were the beginning of something greater than tragedy. The sun climbed higher, melting the edges of ice on the ridge. The reindeer in the distance raised their heads, antlers glinting in the light, as if blessing this fragile rebirth. And as Anya stood among her people, her child in her arms and Doran at her side, she knew the storm had ended, not just outside, but within. This was the dawn of her new life. So, my wonderful friends, the story has come to an end. And yet, if you're still here with me right now, I know something in this tale touched your heart. Anya's journey reminds us that even when we are abandoned, betrayed, and thrown into the coldest storms, we can still rise. The Stoics said, "We cannot control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond." Anya chose not to be broken by betrayal, but to rebuild with strength, dignity, and love. And maybe that's the real lesson. No storm is stronger than the human spirit when guided by courage and faith. So if this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel, because somewhere out there, someone needs this reminder too. Pain can break you, but it can also make you unshakable.